Hello and good morning dear students and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let us take a look at the various articles we have lined up today for today's Hindu news analysis. Before that, a quick update. See, we covered two articles day before yesterday. One was about the Udan scheme and the other one was about the semiconductor scheme. Now, yesterday it was stated by our Civil Aviation Minister that all the routes that were discontinued under the Udan scheme, they will be put once again for bidding. So this is one update that you need to know about. Regarding the semiconductor sector, our External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar, he has said that these policies, the benefits of the policies of semiconductor sector, they are not just for the national level companies but even the international level companies. They can invest India and get the benefits of these schemes. Okay, so now the articles that we have for today. The first article is about the Ujjwala scheme. It is related to the Ujjwala scheme, the PM Ujjwala Yojana, regarding the provisioning of LPG cylinders to rural and poor households. It talks about how India's clean cooking strategy, it can be recalibrated in order to make it more efficient. The second article is regarding the debate that is ongoing in India regarding availability of socio-economic data. Now, availability of this data, it is very important. Why? Because any policy, when it is created, it needs some base, it needs some evidence over which conclusions can be found, the problems can be identified and the policy can be made. If the data is not available, can the policy be effective? No, right? Also, once the policy is put into place, if we do not get the data on how the policy is working on the ground, it cannot even be updated, right? The third article is about the hybrid electric vehicles. Now, there are different type of electric vehicles. This particular article, it talks about how the hybrid EV vehicles, they need to be first put into place and later on the full EV vehicles can be adopted. Why is that? We'll take a look. The last article, it is about the draft National Deep Tech Startup Policy, that the draft of which was released yesterday for public comments. Now, what are the various provisions of this particular policy? What was the need of this policy? We'll take a look. In the Prelims Bytes sections, the first article, it is about the Delhi Services Bill. Now, there was this ordinance to control the bureaucrats of the state of Delhi by the central government after the May 11th decision of Supreme Court. Now this ordinance, it has been introduced into the parliament as a bill with slight modifications. The second one is about the Akira ransomware. What is this ransomware? Why is it problematic? And what are the various suggestions that CERT India, it has given to protect oneself from this ransomware? We'll take a look at that as well. Okay, so the first article, Recalibrating India's Clean Cooking Strategy. See, why is clean cooking so important? Because the other fuels like wood, like cow dung, they release a lot of pollutants. They cause an increase in indoor pollution. They also affect adversely the people who are cooking, especially the women of the house, and also children who usually sit with their mothers while they are cooking in the kitchens. Okay, so that is why it becomes very important that clean fuels, they are provided to all the households of India so that these problems, they can be reduced. Now, in the past 15 years, because of this reason, the government of India, it is trying to improve the LPG adoption in the rural as well as the poor households. Now, earlier, this was done for the urban areas, and urban areas saw a quite tremendous increase in the use of these clean fuels. We want to follow the same model in the rural and poor households. Now, how is it done? First is, we need to have distributors of the cylinders. Now, whenever your cylinder, it gets empty in your household, you call the distributor and get the cylinder from there, right? So there is a big necessity that there should be a good network of distributors in the region who can take these cylinders, take your empty cylinder and give you the full cylinder. So improving distributor base was the first step. This was done through the Gramin Vitrak Yojana, introduced in 2009. Now, how did this help? It helped in growing the rural distribution base from 18% of the total distributors of India to 60% of the total LPG distributors. Okay. Earlier, if there were 100 distributors in India, 18 of them were rural, rest were urban. Now, out of 100, 60 are in the rural regions, only 40 are in the urban regions. The second one, improving the consumer base. How was it done? Through the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. It provided LPG connections to more than 9.5 crore households of India since its inception in the year 2016. But there is one concern that has come into light regarding this particular exercise. What is it? The LPG consumption in Indian households, it saw an absolute decline or absolute reduction in the financial year 23. What is the reduction? The growth is minus 0.5% compared to the previous year. So this is one big concern regarding the use of clean fuels in India. Now, regarding LPG use in India, the share of the use of LPG cylinders, because of the various interventions of government, it has definitely increased, right? Earlier, where it was only 33% in 2011, it has increased to 71% in 2020. Now, this data has been taken from the Indian Residential Energy Consumption Survey, which is conducted by a think tank known as CEEW. Now, this proves that if government intervenes, if the government provides subsidies, government provides free connections, then people are willing to use the LPG cylinders. They are willing to use the clean fuels. So this is one very big conclusion from this study. But since 2020, there have been a lot of problems with regards to the fossil fuel sector in general, right? What problems? One, the Ukraine war. Second, COVID, which led to problems in the availability of these materials, of the LPG. Also, because of COVID, what happened? The livelihood of many people were hit. So they were not able to refill their cylinders. They were not able to refill their cylinders because they did not have any money for that. So they had to go back to using these dirty fuels. Also in 2020, what happened? As COVID, it had its onset, the government of India, it stopped subsidies on the LPG consumption. These subsidies, they were withdrawn for all the consumers. However, later on, in the same year, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana was also introduced in order to help the people who have been hit badly because of the COVID pandemic, whose livelihoods they have been hit badly, right? So under this Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana of financial year 21, 3 free cylinders, they were now being provided to the PMUY consumers, the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana consumers, okay? Now, again, because the free cylinders, they were being provided, that means that once the cylinder has been emptied, they can go to the distributor and get a free refill of the cylinder, right? So this increased the annual refill rates of these LPG cylinders tremendously. It became the average number of cylinders that were getting refilled by the households. It increased to 4.55 cylinders per active connection. Earlier it was only 3 to 4. However, please note that out of the 24 crore cylinders that could have been taken under this scheme for the PM Ujjwala Yojana consumers, only 14.1 crore were actually consumed. What does this prove? This proves that it is not necessary that subsidies will drive people to refill their cylinders. There should be availability of the cylinders near their houses. There should be house drop facility, because many people, they do not even have the money to go to the distributor, get the cylinder and transport it back to their houses. So this raised this another question as well. Later in September 2022, a nominal subsidy, it was reinstated for the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana consumers. What's this subsidy? It was rupees 200 per cylinder. What was the result of it again? The result was, there was again an improvement in the refill rate in financial year 2023 compared to financial year 2022. See, 3 free cylinders were given in financial year 21. In 22, nothing like that was done. In 23, a nominal subsidy was provided. So that meant the people were now again attracted to refill their cylinders. So there was an increase in the refill rate. So average refill rates for the active non-PMUY consumers, however, they are in a slow decline. 40% of these consumers, they get 2 or fewer refills in an year now. So what does this mean? The biggest conclusion out of there is that the cost of the LPG cylinder, it is one of the biggest constraints in adoption of LPG as a fuel. Distribution channel issue, it also remains. So even if we were providing the free LPG cylinder, still many people were not claiming because they did not have a distributor or they did not have any home delivery facilities. They did not have any money for the transportation. This means that more amount of money is required to provide subsidies to the people on their cylinders to entice them, to attract them into getting more and more refills. What are certain other additional challenges with regards to usage of LPG? See, we know that we import most of our fossil fuel needs, right? Even with regards to the LPG, the liquefied petroleum gas, our dependence on imports is very high. It is more than 64% in financial year 2023. Compare that to pre-Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana phase, where the adoption of the LPG, it was not very high. At that point, our import dependence was 46%. It has tremendously increased now. So government, they are giving subsidies. They are also paying higher import prices. So there is a double whammy on the government of India. Also, there was a near doubling in the LPG prices since May 2020 in nominal terms. That means excluding inflation. Why? COVID and the war. So that was another problem. So the volatile prices, they are extremely volatile. The prices of fossil fuels, fossil fuel products, LPG, they are quite volatile because specifically of Russian war. Also, the domestic budget of India, it is highly dependent upon taxes from the petroleum sector. A lot of revenue of the government of India, it comes from the petroleum sector. So we cannot even reduce the prices in the market prices we cannot reduce. The government is not able to give more subsidies. They already took away the subsidies. Now only nominal subsidies for the PMUY users, nothing else, right? So this is a big problem. Volatile prices, the issue of subsidies. Now what are the possible solutions? The possible solution, see, first you can say that apart from pricing, there is also an access and transport issue, right? So access and transport issue, it can be eliminated by use of pipelines. For example, in many NCR cities, there is availability of gas, cooking gas, natural gas, not LPG, via pipelines. So why do not we do that? Because that would be much cheaper. We would not have to store those heavy cylinders as well, right? But the issue is that it is very extensive. Sorry, it is very expensive in nature, this particular venture. Also, many unregistered colonies, unregistered houses, kacha houses, the squatter settlements, which actually are in dire need for these clean fuels, they cannot be connected using these formal pipelines because they are unregistered colonies, they are squatter settlements, right? So that this cannot be done. So this again raises a question mark. What can be the solution? One solution can be, we can shift from this LPG only technology by the use of electric cooking. Electric cooking by using induction cooktops. Now this can be feasible because already India has achieved 100% rural electrification. In fact, according to a study by the same think tank CEEW, even if the tariff of electricity is high as at rupees 8 per unit of electricity, even then use of electricity for cooking, it will be much cheaper than using the LPG cylinders for cooking purposes. This will also avoid any kind of release of pollutants. So what will happen usually when LPG, 1 gallon of LPG, that is approximately 3.78 liter of LPG, it releases 5680 grams of carbon dioxide. That can also be eliminated if we use the electric cooktops. However, you will say that if to produce that electricity, this fuel, it will be burnt and again CO2 will be released. But the bigger plants, they can employ carbon sequestration technology. You cannot expect a simple household to adopt any carbon sequestration technology to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide, right? Also, in urban areas, already almost 10% of households, they have shifted to electric cooking. So that means that this is a feasible thing. But how to push the manufacturers to develop the electric cooking setups according to Indian conditions? See, first is increasing the demand for electric cooking. How it can be done? See, this can be done by increasing the LPG prices beyond a particular threshold. For example, if an average 7 cylinders, they are being used by Indian households, right? So instead of that, so what we'll do is that up till 7 cylinders, a particular price, it will be quoted for the cylinders. If you want to buy the 8th cylinder for that year, the price, it will be drastically increased, maybe twice the earlier price. So what will happen? The high use households, they will be nudged towards using electric cooking, and this will lead to what? This will lead to an increase in the demand for these electric cooktops, which will encourage the manufacturers to manufacture them more and more. They will also be encouraged to manufacture them or to design them in such a way that they are useful for Indian markets. Now there are certain dishes in India, say simple chapati, like bangan bharta. You require the flame to cook them, right? You cannot do that on induction cooktop, correct? So for that reason, these manufacturers, they also need to explore certain other design ideas like hybrid cooktops. Moreover, the saved emissions, the emissions that are saved because of the less burning of these LPG cylinders, they can be traded in the carbon trading market, the policy for which it is going to get released very soon. They can be traded in the carbon trading market, and the money that is gained out of it, it can be used to increase the awareness about these technologies in the Indian country. Okay. So this is about the first topic. Now we move on to the second topic. The second topic, the debate on data. See, over past few years, especially over the past few months, there has been a lot of debate on the credibility, on the availability, on the accessibility of updated data regarding various socio-economic indicators in India. See, availability of this data, as I stated when I was introducing this topic in the contents, it is very essential for any economy. This data helps us in realizing what kind of policy do we need, where should be the focus of these policy. Once the policy is implemented, it provides a feedback loop so that the policy can be accordingly tweaked based on the requirement of the people. So availability of data, it is a very important input for any kind of policy formulation as well as policy implementation. So recently there have been many debates about it. Now, why is it essential that India should have a very good data regime? It is because of these reasons. In April 2023, India was elected for 4 years as a member of the United Nations Statistical Commission, one of the biggest statistical organization of the world. Okay, it is United Nations organization. So that means India needs to set an example as a member of this commission in front of the world that our data regime is so good that we'll be working for the same at a global scale in this particular organization. Secondly, India is the most populous country of the world now. So being the most populous country, it becomes even more essential that if we want any kind of fulfillment of sustainable development goals or any other efforts of the global community, we need to have proper data. Because if India slips, the global community will slip down with regards to achievement of these goals. Third is, we are set to become the third biggest economy in the world. Our Prime Minister, he recently announced that in the next 5 years, India might become the third biggest economy of the world. So that also increases our responsibility towards providing good quality data to the world. See, in case of any company, the company has data, right? It has accounts. So they release these accounts to the investors to show that the corporate governance is proper in their condition, right? Same thing applies on the governments as well. In order for the governments to have trust of the global community, the data that is released by them, it should be very precise, very accurate and quite updated, right? So our responsibility to provide adequate and accurate socio-economic data, it increases in light of all these points. Now data. The writer has stated that data is public good. What is public good? Public good is something that is non-rival and non-excludable. What does this mean? Non-excludable means that any person, they cannot be excluded from use of this good just because they are not able to pay for it or for any other reason. No one can be excluded from use of this good. What does non-rival mean? Non-rival means that if I use this good, it does not leave less amount of that good for your use. Okay, so everyone can use this good without the fear of it getting diminished. So many private agencies, they do have a lot of data that they release periodically. However, they exclude certain consumers from the use of this data through certain fees that they charge for downloading or using of this data. So in such a scenario, it becomes a very big importance. It becomes very important for the government to release or provide this public good, that is the socio-economic data. Now, India, when it got its independence, it had realized back then that good quality data is very important for any economy, for any society. That's why we established very robust statistical systems both at the central level as well as the state level, right? According to a journalist, Mr. Prameet Bhattacharya, Indian statistical system was the envy of the world till early 1970s. The world, they used to give the example of India with regards to providing the data on each and everything. However, since that time, since early 1970s, our data quality and availability, it started to decline. Right now, when data analysis, data collection is so important in the world that the many global players, many big industrialists, they have said that data is the new oil. In such a scenario, when we have such good technologies for data collection, data analysis, it becomes very important that we start collecting and giving due importance to this data. So right now, what are the various concerns with regards to data in India? First is the quality as well as the credibility. How much can you trust it of the data? See, surveys, especially the household surveys in India, they are facing quite a lot of questions with regards to what kind of sample they are taking for their study. See, samples, they should be like the population. For example, if the population has 31% of urban population, rest of it is rural population, then the sample taken for any survey that is undertaking the study about the rural and the urban households, it should be in such a way that the ratio of the urban to the rural respondents is in the same manner as the actual population, right? So the sample should mimic the population in order for us to get actual and the good quality results. However, a recent paper by the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister has stated that these surveys, they are not taking these samples properly, right? They do not adequately capture the urban part of the economy. They are all focusing upon rural India, while urban India, its picture is not getting captured in these surveys. So this is first concern, the quality and the credibility of the data. The second is multiple agencies, they are involved in providing same type of data on same set of indicators. However, the final data, it is different. So they are giving data for the same thing. They have used the same indicator, but the final results, they are completely different. The final picture is completely different. So this creates a problem. Which data set should we use for policy formulation? Which agency's data needs to be used for the policy formulation? For example, with regards to the manufacturing sector, there are two agencies that are releasing data. One is Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Next is annual survey of industry. The data on the same sector, on same indicators by both of them, it is coming out to be different. So who do we trust? That is the second question. The third question is the competence and the ability of the system to generate and disseminate high quality data. Are we able to collect the data properly? Are we able to analyze properly? Right? So that is one big question. Another question. In recent times, many of our surveys, they have either been delayed, biggest one being census of 2021. Other surveys, they were completed, the data was processed, but there was no release of the reports regarding those surveys in the public domain. So public did not get the access to that data which had been very much cleaned and processed. For example, here once again, many data, it is not properly updated as well. For example, wholesale price index, consumer price index, their base years are still 2011-12 and 2012. They have not been updated. Now, if India is becoming the third biggest economy of the world, we need to provide these economic data, these basic economic data to the world. We also need all this data to set our inflation. In fact, RBI uses CPI for its inflation targeting. So that is why all this is important. So the agency should be made competent enough. They should be provided proper training so that they can generate good quality data. The government should also not take any such decision that prohibits release of any kind of data. Because this non-availability of this updated, up-to-date data, it prevents our assessment of the economic growth and poverty reduction. So, what does it mean? We are not able to formulate adequate policies in order to address these issues. Also, with the census 2021 yet to take place, in fact, on July 3rd, there was a news article which said that census would not even take place this year. It might get delayed to next year, even after the general elections. So with census getting delayed, there is more and more necessity to have other sources of data in order to get a clear picture of how India is doing in various aspects. Because in lack of such data and lack of an accurate picture of socio-economic needs and the development of India, what happens? The targeting is not proper. The results of any policies that are obtained which determine whether the policy is a success or a failure, they are not also adequate, right? So, policy makers, they end up celebrating success on the outcomes that are derived from very thin samples. For example, the population of India is 1.4 billion. However, we formulated a policy and derived results of a policy on the basis of a study that was done only for, say, 20 lakh people. So that would not be an accurate picture of India. Example, Niti Aayog recently released the National Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index of 2023. Now this index, it used the data of NFHS 5 survey. Now NFHS 5 survey, which was held in 2019-21, it had data for how many households? 6 lakh households. But India has how many households? 30 crore households. See, the way in which the NFHS, it gets data, it creates its sample, it is very pristine. We cannot question that. But still, we do not have census data. We do not have any other data that can provide us as an alternate approach for triangulation of this data to prove that this data of NFHS is correct. But on the basis of NFHS data, we are releasing various indices. So how much is that correct? So that is why it is very necessary. It is extremely necessary that all this data, it is properly compiled and provided, and the government, it takes necessary steps in order to make this data publicly available as a public good. The next question or the next article is about the EVs, electric vehicles in India. See, electric vehicles, they can be of multiple types. Why are they necessary? Because the transport sector, it has become one of the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. According to a study by the International Energy Agency, in 2021, the transport sector was responsible for 37% of the global carbon dioxide emission. Okay, this is an important data. You can use it in your mains. In terms of the growth of emissions, it is the fastest sector. The growth of emissions, it is fastest in this sector. So in order to follow the net zero emission target for this particular sector, the emissions from transportation sector, it needs to reduce at a rate of 20%. Okay. In India as well, transport sector is one of the most emitting sector of India. It is the third most emitting sector after what? After power, that is electricity generation, and after industry. So what are the solutions for this? Solutions are four. One, we can increase the fuel efficiency. We can use the alternate fuels. Third, we can use public transport. And the fourth one is use of electric vehicles. So what are the various types of electric vehicles in India? First is, not in India, at a global scale. First is the hybrid electric vehicles. The hybrid electric vehicles, they have an internal combustion engine built within them. Internal combustion engine, it uses this fuel that is put in these vehicles to generate electricity. A small battery is also associated in this vehicle, and this battery, it stores any of the extra electricity that is generated by this engine. Now this electricity, it is then used to run the vehicle. So instead of normal internal combustion engines do, they directly use the vehicle, burn it, and use that to thrust the vehicle. Here what is happening? This internal combustion engine is there. It is using the fuel. But this fuel is first getting converted to electricity. This electricity is then being used to run the vehicle. So what happens here is that there is no power plant emission associated with that vehicle. There is nothing like first in the power plant, the electricity is generated, then the vehicle is charged, and then the vehicle runs. The vehicle is generating its own electricity. So power plant emissions related to these vehicles, these hybrid electric vehicles, they are nil. Second is the full EV, the full electric vehicle. What are the full electric vehicles? They do not have any internal combustion engine within them. So that is why there are no tailpipe emissions. Now there are two types of emissions from the electric vehicles. One is the tailpipe emission. Second is the power plant emission. Power plant emission, the emissions from the power plants which were used to generate the electricity in order to run that vehicle. What is tailpipe emission? Tailpipe emission is the emission done by burning the fuel by the internal combustion engine in order to generate electricity to run the vehicle, right? So in full EVs, there is zero tailpipe emission because they are not burning any fuel to generate electricity. They are using electricity directly from the grid and then using them to run, right? The battery of the full EVs, it is typically much larger compared to the hybrid EVs. However, please note that the batteries of these hybrid EVs, they cannot be charged directly using the grid. However, for full EV, the batteries can only be charged by using the power from grid. Next, we have the plug-in EVs. Now, these EVs, these electric vehicles, they have bigger batteries compared to these hybrid EVs. But the benefit of these plug-in EVs is that they can be also charged from the grid. See, plug-in hybrid EVs, they do have this internal combustion engine which generates electricity which runs the vehicle. However, their battery, it can also be charged from the grid. For the normal hybrid EVs, their battery, it cannot be charged from the grid. Also, we have the fuel cell EVs. Now, these EVs, they use the fuel cells. Fuel cells, they are like chemical batteries. So, these fuel cells, they produce electricity. This electricity, it charges another small battery which can be used for running the vehicles. So, these are the four types of EVs in existence. So, what are the net emissions associated with these EVs? See, fuel economy of these EVs, it is higher compared to the normal vehicles, normal petrol or diesel vehicles. The fuel economy, that is the number of kilometers they can run using 1 liter of fuel. That is much higher both for the full EVs as well as the hybrid EVs. Now, there are certain emissions that are associated over here. We talked about tailpipe emission. We talked about the power plant emission. So, wheel to well emission, it includes the tailpipe emission plus the emissions that were created because of the fuel production. Well is what? Well is petroleum wells from where the fuel is taken out. So they include the emissions that were created because of extraction of that fuel. From there to the power plant, to the tailpipe emission, everything is included in the well to wheel emissions. Next is life cycle emissions. Now they include the well to wheel emissions, these ones, plus the emissions because of the creation of the vehicle, because of the creation or production of the battery, maintenance of the vehicles throughout its lifetime, and also the emissions that will be created when we take all this for recycling. So on the basis of these emissions, it is found that for case of full EVs, full electric vehicles, we can reduce the amount of emissions in an absolute term just by using renewables for generation of the electricity that eventually runs these vehicles. For full EVs, this can also be done. Now, net emissions, according to analysis of the life cycle emissions by this agency known as International Council on Clean Transportation in countries like USA, India, Europe, as well as China. So they did this study to analyze these life cycle emissions, and they found out that switching to full electric vehicles, it will release 19 to 34% lower emissions by the sedan cars and 38 to 49 lower emissions by the SUVs. So that means that going EV, it is very beneficial for the environment. Moreover, by 2030, many countries, they have committed that they will reduce the amount of fossil fuels in their energy mix. So more and more use of renewables will be done. So this will further reduce the emissions to 30 to 56% lower compared to the other vehicles, the fuel vehicles. In case the entire grid becomes renewable, entire 100% of electricity that is generated in a country starts coming from the renewable sources, then in that case these emissions will be up to 79% lower compared to the normal vehicles. However, there are certain challenges that are associated with electric mobility. First is that we have a lack of fast charging infrastructure in the highway regions. Now usually what happens, for most of the households in India, we have one car. So this one car, it is used for city driving as well and for long drives as well, going from one city to another city, right, on the highways. It is used for both the purposes. No one goes to the market and buys one vehicle only for the city and the second vehicle only for highways. Some people might do it, but usually households do not do that. They have one vehicle which they use for approximately 15 years and then they change it. So in this case what happens, there is something known as range anxiety. So these electric vehicles, they have certain amount of range. They can only go for a certain distance on full charge, right? Just like your phone, it can work only for certain number of hours. Similarly, these electric vehicles, they can work only for certain number of kilometers, beyond which they will need a recharge, right? So if I am going on a long route and I do not have access to any charging infrastructure, would I buy an electric vehicle? I have the ability to buy only one car. I will not buy it. Why? I will not buy an electric vehicle because I'll know that if I want to go for a longer distance, I cannot use this vehicle. So this is one big problem associated with electric vehicles. Now, why is this problem existing? See, the high cost of this infrastructure is very important impediment in getting access to this charging infrastructure. This cost, the capital cost of this charging infrastructure can range from $500 to $1,000 per kilowatt. Plus, there will be added maintenance charges and an added installation cost, right? So there is a huge amount of cost associated with this infrastructure. Moreover, in many parts of the world, especially in the developing countries, the grid power, especially in the remote areas, it is either not available or it is not reliable. So I might go on a route from place A to B with my electric vehicle. I know that in the middle of this route we have a charging station. But I go to that charging station and I realize that there is no electricity for next 4 hours in that charging station. What will happen? I'll be stranded over there, right? So this is another concern regarding the electric vehicles, especially in the developing economy. Also, for the full electric vehicles, as I stated, the battery sizes are quite big, right? So the battery cost is very high compared to the other normal vehicles. So that is why the EV cost, the cost of the full EVs, it is much higher compared to the other normal fuel vehicles. See, government has given certain subsidies, but even then the cost is a big impediment in regards to achievement of full EV deployment in India. So what is the solution? See, hybrid EVs, they can be the short-term solution for our emission problems. Right now, mostly petrol vehicles. We want to go to full EV, right? So in the middle, as a transition, these hybrid EVs, they can play a very important role. See, compared to the ICE vehicles, they still have less emissions. Their fuel economy, the amount of kilometers they'll run on 1 liter of fuel compared to the normal ICE vehicles, it is 1.5 to 2 times higher for normal hybrid, and it is 3 to 4 times higher for the plug-in hybrid, right? So this is higher. So that is one benefit which is very much comparable to the full EVs, right? So this can help in reducing the fuel cost. It can help in reducing the emissions, as well as it can help in reducing our oil import bills. Moreover, there is this technology known as regenerative braking, which is used in the hybrid EVs. What is this technology? Now, usually when you put brake in your car, what happens? The energy, the kinetic energy of the wheels, your wheels were moving. So the kinetic energy of these wheels, it is dissipated as heat. In case of these hybrid vehicles, this kinetic energy, it is used to again generate electricity. And this electricity, it gets stored in the batteries. So especially in big cities where there is a lot of, braking that you need to do, a lot of traffic jams, where you accelerate then brake, right? There is a lot of braking involved in such cases. In such cases, this regenerative braking of the hybrid vehicles, it can be very important. Apart from that, this can also be important in the hilly conditions. Also, the prices of these vehicles, these hybrid vehicles, they are much less compared to the full EVs. They are only 5 to 15% higher than the conventional vehicles, and this is independent of the vehicle range. That is, how many kilometers they will move. Usually in full EVs, what happens? If the range of the vehicle is higher, the price will also be higher. But in hybrid EVs, that is not the case. Irrespective of the range, the vehicle prices are similar, and they are only 5 to 15% higher compared to the traditional vehicles. So that is why these hybrid EVs, they can act as a very good stepping stone from transitioning to these traditional vehicles to the full electric vehicles. Now we come to the next topic. The next topic is government floats the draft National Deep Tech Startup Policy. Now what is this policy? Why it has been floated? We'll take a look. See, the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, they have put this draft. Why is this draft put? What is the aim of it? The aim is to ensure India has a very high position in the future in the global deep tech value chain. Deep tech value chain, technologies like semiconductors, like artificial intelligence, like space technology. Basically, the technologies that are related to the fourth industrial revolution. So just like we have a very good position at a global level in case of software industry, we want the similar position at a global level in case of these deep technology industries. Now, what are the 4 pillars of this policy? They can also be the needs of the policy. You can also write them under the needs of the policy. The first is to ensure security of India's economic future. We do not want to depend upon any other country. We do not want to go out and beg for technology to any other country in order to improve our economy. India also already is undergoing what? A demographic dividend. If we are able to develop these high scale technologies, these deep technologies, then in that case, what will happen? We will be able to provide more and more employment to many of our skilled people, skilled youth. Secondly, it will facilitate a seamless transition to a knowledge-driven economy. So knowledge-driven economy, this is the future of the world, right? Knowledge-driven economy, the economy which is based on data. It is the future of the world. We want to develop such technologies so that this data of India, it can be effectively used for its own benefit. We can seamlessly transition from a physical economy to a knowledge-driven economy. Also, bolstering national capability and sovereignty through Atmanirbhar Bharat imperative. Again, why was Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme? It was introduced in India. We do not want to depend upon anyone else for our domestic needs. We want to do import substitution. We do not want any of our domestic policies to be influenced by any outside player just because we want certain technologies from them, right? So this is also important. Next, fostering ethical innovation. See, India is known for its ethics. We want that any kind of innovation that is done in case of these technologies, it is very ethical in nature, okay? There are no malpractices with regards to these technology because that can be very dangerous. So what are the 9 priorities of this particular draft policy? The first is development of a proper or robust research and development as well as innovation hub within India. We are going to use our highly skilled youth and we are going to use these highly skilled youth to foster research and development and innovation in the country. Now, once research and development is on the move, a lot of innovations are being done. What will be needed? We will need that the intellectual property that is created within India, it is properly protected. Next, we would require funding. These startups, they will require a lot of funding for these technologies because investment in technologies, it is very high. So this policy will ensure that both public and private funding is available to these deep tech startups. The policy will also ensure that infrastructure is developed both by public and private sector, and this infrastructure, including the infrastructure of many of the educational institutes of India, it can be used by these startups on paying a nominal fee. Next, all the startups of India, the ministries involved in all those sectors, they need to come together and develop their own regulations, standards and certifications. This should not be done by any international agency and then imposed upon India. It should be done in-house. Next, diversity and capacity building with regards to the skilled labor. So we will try to encourage the educational institutes, the industries to help in developing more and more skilled force for these sectors. We will also make sure that any external person, any non-Indian person who wants to work in India in these technologies, they get the facility to do that. Next, adoption. Now, the policy also states that they will take necessary actions to ensure that any kind of technology and the products made out of them, they can be adopted easily by both the public and the private sector. And for that, they will ensure that the national policies of the country, they include certain sections that promote the adoption of these technologies. Last, sustenance. Now, any industry, once they have started, they need to sustain in the market for a long period of time. So, this policy, one of the priority of this policy is also sustenance. Sustenance, that they should have enough funding so that they can they can get involved in research and development, they can produce their products, they can get their products intellectually recognized, they can send their products outside India, and they can do that without any tension regarding funding. Okay, so these are the 9 priority areas. Now what are the major provisions of this particular draft policy? See, right now many of these sectors, they are very scattered. For example, semiconductors come under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, space sector comes under DST, right? Biotechnology comes under DBT. So there are a lot of other ministries and departments in which the deep technology, it is scattered. So there will be an interministerial deep tech committee which will have members of all these ministries who will come together and review the requirements to enable this ecosystem in the country. Next, simplifying the intellectual property regime so that any products that are created, they can be easily registered in intellectual property offices of India. The regulatory requirements for such deep tech companies, startups, it will also be eased down so that they do not have to spend a lot of money in this regard. Moreover, the Export Promotion Board, it will be created so that these companies, these startups, they can export their products to other countries. Moreover, India, when they will sign any kind of economic deal with any other country, they will ensure that such clause, such access clauses, they can be included in those agreements. With regards to funding, both public and private funding through CSRs, through venture capitalists, public funding through government grants, ministerial grants, and also through fund of funds, they will be ensured using this policy. Moreover, access to shared infrastructure in exchange for a nominal fee will also be provided to these startups, especially in the academic institutes of India. Also, to attract the best talent of the world, networking opportunities, they will be provided to all of them so that they can have access to Indian markets and Indian knowledge ecosystem. They can work in collaboration with Indian startups. Also, coordinated comprehensive push, it will be made so that these companies, they can collaborate with international partners. Next, this policy will also come together with all the partners to define the various standards of regulation and various basic technology standards for these deep technologies so that no other country in the world starts dictating India with such things. Now we come to the Prelims Bytes section. Quickly I'll cover it. First is Delhi Services Bill is likely to be tabled today in the Lok Sabha. Now this bill, it will replace the Delhi Services Ordinance that was released in May 2023 by the President of India. Now this ordinance, it negated the judgment by the Supreme Court which was made on May 11th. On May 11th, the Supreme Court said that the Delhi government has the control over any kinds of services in Delhi except police, public order and land. So that includes that Delhi government had control of bureaucracy as well. Now according to this bill, the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, they will have a final say in the postings and transfers of all the bureaucrats that are working in Delhi. This particular bill also establishes a permanent authority known as National Capital Civil Service Authority. It will consist of 3 members. Head will be Chief Minister, there will be Chief Secretary, there will also be the Principal Home Secretary. So these will be the members of this particular authority which will decide regarding the transfers and the postings of various officers in Delhi. Okay. However, the final decision, it will be taken by the Lieutenant Governor. Also, the Lieutenant Governor, he will have the final say in case there arises any kind of dispute amongst the members of the NCCSA regarding posting of any officer. It also empowers the Lieutenant Governor to appoint the heads of boards or any commissions like Delhi Jal Board, Delhi Women Commission, that are enacted by the Delhi Legislative Assembly. So basically, Lieutenant Governor, he is an agent of the center in the union territories. Same happens in case of Delhi, even though Delhi has a legislative assembly. So center, it is acquiring these powers from the Delhi government using this particular bill. Next is Akira ransomware. What is a ransom? Someone kidnapped someone. They ask for a ransom. Someone is blackmailing someone. They try to extort money out of the person who is being blackmailed. So that is known as ransom. So Akira ransomware. This is a ransomware which can target both Windows systems and Linux systems. It cannot target the Apple systems or iOS. So it targets these systems, steal their information, encrypts that information, and asks for money in exchange for decryption. So they have encrypted your information, you do not have access to information. If you want this information to be decrypted, you'll have to pay these people. So why did it get this name? It has gotten this name because any file that gets encrypted by this ransomware, its extension changes to .akira. Now how can your system get infected by it? Through virtual private network systems, especially when users, they do not have the two-step authentication done in their systems. Okay. So it is designed to close the processes or shut down the Windows services that are preventing it from any kind of encryption. So if you have any antivirus, any Windows Defender, so this particular ransomware has the power that they can stop the functioning of these systems so that it can properly, happily encrypt the information. Now once this ransomware, it infects a particular device, it can steal, encrypt any kind of sensitive data, and this group, in exchange of decryption, they will ask money. So this is ransom 1. Now ransom 2 is also asked. They threaten you with release of that information on darknet. If you do not give them the money, they'll release that information on the darknet. Okay, so there are two types of ransoms, two levels of ransoms that these people, these groups, they are trying to extort from the victims. Now in many cases, like in hospitals, like in banks, this information, it is very crucial, and once it is released on the dark web, then that will create a lot of panic amongst a lot of people. Also, this particular ransomware, it deletes a system known as Windows Shadow Volume. Now this system, it is used for creating backups of the files. So this ransomware, it also deletes this system so that no backup can be created for those files as well. Now what is the protection against this which the CERT India has stated? First is basic internet hygiene needs to be followed. You do not need to click every link that you see, right? So this should be done. Internet hygiene should be followed. Secondly, proper offline backup, up-to-date backup of all your data, it should be done, especially with regards to companies which deal with sensitive data. It should also ensure that all the operating systems and networks, they are updated regularly so that any kind of security patches that are needed in those systems, they can be downloaded and then they can be protected from these kind of ransomwares. Also, strong password policies should be deployed. Multi-factor authentication should be done. Many of us, we just skip the option when Gmail asks us for two-step authentication, right? Many of you might have done that. That should not be done. Also, strict external device usage policy should be adopted, that no external hard drives, no external USBs can be used in the systems which contain this crucial information. Also, periodic security audits should be done of the critical networks and the systems which can be attacked by such ransomwares. So in conclusion, first we talked about the LPG system of India, how it can be improved. Second topic was about data, the problems with data in India. The third one was about the electric vehicles, how the hybrid vehicles, they will be the future they will be the stepping stone to move from traditional to the full EVs. The fourth topic was about the draft deep tech startup policy that has been released yesterday for comments, for public comments. Next, in the prelim section, first we talked about this bill in Delhi that will control the Delhi bureaucracy, that will bring the control of bureaucracy under the center. And the second one was about the Akira ransomware. What is the problem associated with it and how can you protect your system? So in the mains practice question section, the first question is, the PM Ujjwala Yojana saw a huge push towards the use of LPG for cooking. However, lately the LPG adoption levels in the country, they have declined. There was a decline of 0.5%. Enumerate the possible reasons for this. Also suggest certain solutions for the same. So everything, it has been adequately covered. You need to mention why there was a decline in livelihoods, decline in availability of subsidy, increase in the prices. Then the suggested solutions, you can mention pipelines can be one solution to address the issue of access, but that is not very viable. Then electric cooking. Next question is, availability of reliable and timely socio-economic data is a crucial step towards good governance. Why? Because for good governance, that means you have to have good policies. Good policies can be formulated only if you have proper data. And also these policies can be revised only if you have the evaluation data of the policies. What are the roadblocks that can hinder this data availability? You can talk about the various concerns that we are facing in India right now regarding this data availability. So with that, we come to an end to today's session. I hope you were able to understand and enjoy this session. So thank you very much, and do not forget to head to our Telegram channel to attempt the quiz made on this particular session. So thank you very much and have a very good day.